Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are joining from. Welcome to this webinar organized by the World Bioenergy Association and Bioenergy International. Today's webinar is focused on green cooking as key for deploying modern bioenergy. This webinar is part of our autumn series of webinars. We have 4 webinars scheduled. This is the second one. There are 2 more coming in the next few months, so be sure to sign in for those. This webinar is done in collaboration with Bioenergy International. In our previous series, in the spring series, we had more than 1,700 registrants from more than 100 different countries. And remember that all the recordings and presentations will be available for you after this webinar. And you can ask all your questions through the chat option in Zoom. The registrations we had before are from across the globe. We had participants from different spheres, from industry, from research institutes, government, civil society, consultancies, etc. And a few words about the World Bioenergy Association. This is a global industry based in Stockholm, and it was established in 2008. Our mission is to represent all the bioenergy actors while promoting the sustainable development of bioenergy. We aim for international advocacy for the use of bioenergy and to be a platform for engagement. Our members are among different actors, fuel producers, utilities, research institutions, equipment manufacturers, heating companies, etc. Within the spectrum of bioenergy, we cover solid, liquid, and gaseous fuels. And our membership is open for all the companies and associations in the field of bioenergy. The benefits of being a member of the WBA is to be able to participate as a speaker at different bioenergy events, to join the WBA delegations to different forums, to be able to have member publications, to participate in different working groups to discuss the different challenges within the bioenergy field, and also to support advocacy for sustainable bioenergy. Now, once again, don't forget that after this webinar, you will receive a video recording, a presentation of this webinar, and also a link to join us as a member. Thank you for joining us today, and I will give the floor to Christian to start with the moderation of this webinar. And thank you for your patience. We had some technical issues at the beginning, but thank you for joining us. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Christian Rakosch. I'm president of the World Bioenergy Association. Apologies also from my side for the delayed start. There were some technical issues we were not able to sort, but now they are sorted and we can kick it off. So today's webinar is about a very important topic, if you will. It is about the most important topic related to bioenergy. Why? Because 40% of all bioenergy use globally is traditional bioenergy use. Bioenergy used by open fires, by using charcoal for cooking, for heating homes. And this is a practice that is very widely used throughout Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, in many places. And in many cases, this traditional use of bioenergy has sustainability issues. This has issues regarding the health of the persons that are cooking, for example, that are exposed to the smoke. There are issues regarding to overuse of biomass, particularly in Africa. We have a rapid deforestation as a result of overuse of biomass for energy. We have also other issues. I mean, just think about the implications that traditional cooking has for livelihoods, for children work, etc., etc. So we need to look for other solutions, and a lot of attention is paid to clean cooking nowadays. Very often clean cooking means switching to fossil fuels like LPG, for example, which is certainly much better from the point of view of air pollution, but it has implications regarding the affordability, the expenses, and also to the livelihoods that are lost because local biomass is not used anymore. This is the reason why the World Bioenergy Association very strongly promotes the concept of green cooking, which means using biomass, but using it in a way that is sustainable in many dimensions, in terms of health impacts, because it does not produce smoke, in terms of sustainability of biomass use by using residuals that have not been used in the past. And the key to clean cooking is to look both at the fuel and at the way the fuel is being used. By improving the fuel, for example, by densification, by pelletization, and by improving the way we run our cook stoves. Today, we have 4 entrepreneurs here in the room that will share with you their experiences of trying to introduce green cooking in Africa. And I'm very much very thankful for these 4 gentlemen that have been spending years of their lives already dedicated to this topic, for being here and for sharing with us their experiences. I will kick it off with Tom Price. Tom Price is managing and has funded the company EcoSafi. Tom, please show us your slides and share your experiences.
Thank you, Christian. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Tom Price. I'm the founder and CEO of EcoSafi. We are a tool and fuel business currently operating in East Africa. And because so many of the panelists may have a diversity of experience, I will hope you'll indulge me a little bit as I explain what may be basic to some of you and new to others. So obviously, as Christian referenced, this is a huge issue. There are hundreds of millions of households cooking with basically ancient Stone Age technology that is the leading source of household air pollution. And interestingly, and this statistic surprised me the most, the leading source of CO2 emissions per household in the developing world is making dinner. And that just really drives home the point that there's such an opportunity here to make an impact, not just on climate, but also on health. So our business is pretty straightforward. We provide customers with a no-cost use of a very clean biomass gasification stove. It has a battery and a fan. And then we sell them to fuel to use in it. So long as they buy a minimum amount of fuel from us every month, they get to keep the stove and use it. Because we own the stove and they don't, we're responsible for its care. So if the stove ever breaks, we replace it or repair it at no cost. And similarly, we offer a guarantee on the pellet fuel. So if they ever get a bag of fuel that they don't like, we replace it at no cost. This pellet fuel costs about 40% less than using charcoal. And using pellets instead of charcoal is 98% cleaner, excuse me, than charcoal. We make it out of crop waste, so there's no trees involved, and like I mentioned, it's cheaper. We then have a fully digital supply chain that customers can use to order, and that we can track the fuel sales to the customer, and that enables high value carbon offsets. So I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. I think that is the key focus here. This so-called fuel switch from a traditional fuel to a cleaner fuel costs money. There are a couple of different approaches. One is sell the stove to the customers. That's one approach. Another is provide it at no cost and then use revenue from the fuel that you sell them or from the carbon offsets to pay for the stove. We are an end-to-end sustainable company. So we take crop waste that was otherwise going to be rotting, process it in electric factories. In some cases, we deliver free of charge to our customers on electric motorcycles, and it's a drop-in replacement for charcoal and other fossil fuels. So, improved cooking or clean cooking? What does clean cooking really mean? The WHO has a series of tiers, 0 being lowest, 5 being the highest, where 5 is considered clean cooking. And I want to point out this chart here because it really brings the issue home. You have to, this is tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and tier 5. You can see here the impact on health. You have to be incredibly clean to make a real substantial impact on health. And it's got to be tier 4 or 5 for us to make a measurable difference in the performance of health outcomes. So improved cooking is good, but it's not good enough if you want to make an impact on health. It's got to be actually clean, and that means tier 4, tier 5. So how do we pay for it? Well, maybe we pay for it with carbon. The problem is that the voluntary carbon market right now is an absolute disaster, and that's because over and over again, analysis is showing that the methodologies that have been used have turned out to not be as accurate as people would hope. And so while companies and individuals are rightly trying to invest in carbon offsets, trying to pay for an action in one place to take an action somewhere else, those offsets haven't always been substantiated, and in many cases have been wildly overstated with devastating results because it damages credibility in the space. And that is unfortunately also the case in clean cooking. Now, the market for these offsets is growing very, very quickly. Clean cooking is now the majority of the non-nature-based voluntary carbon market issuance. You can look at the increase in issuances there growing very, very quickly recently. This is a chart from B0 here on the left. But the number of projects that are growing that buyers can have confidence in is not keeping up with the growth. The chart on the right shows all of the projects that B0 has rated. These are all gold standard or Verra rated projects, but the question is whether or not they are likely to have the impact. It's important to understand just having a Verra or a gold standard label is no longer good enough. Because as clearly shown, when you dig into the analysis of each of these projects, some of them are A or AA rated, which means they're likely to have the impact that buyers want, but many of them, the majority, aren't. And clean cooking projects, as you can see here, are not rating well. In fact, an independent analysis, the first ever comprehensive analysis of the over and under crediting of offsets from clean cooking projects, found that there was pervasive overcrediting from clean cooking projects. And that 86% of the offsets emission issued to date may not have existed. The key variables are, what is the baseline that the customer was previously using? How confident are we in that baseline? 2, what's the so-called fraction of non-renewable biomass? Basically, that means of the trees that were cut down to make the charcoal, how many of them were going to grow back? How many weren't? That helps understand what the long-term climate implications are. And then the conversion rate of firewood to charcoal and so forth. Each of these metrics compounds on top of each other. And what's become clear in recent years is that we need a better methodology to calculate what impact is actually taking place so that we can monetize the benefit that does occur when it occurs so that we can pay for these fuel switch programs. And the solution that appears to make the most sense is a brand new methodology from the gold standard. It's called the metered and measured energy for cooking devices, or MECD. What it does is uses the fuel cells as a proxy for usage. So if you know what a customer was previously using in terms of charcoal, and you know how much clean cooking fuel you've sold that customer, it's pretty easy to do the math and figure out, well, if they were using this, and now they're using this, and it replaces this, then this is the impact that's taking place. And so this new methodology requires, one, knowing what is being used beforehand, using robust baseline surveys. Don't use a national average for customers that live in an urban area. That's not appropriate. Use one that makes sense for those customers. Two, switch to cleaner fuels. Not use less of something that was dirty, but switch to something that is clean. So densified biomass, LPG, ethanol, electricity, whatever it is, switch to something that's truly clean, tier 4, tier 5+. And then three, prove what's being used after the switch with reporting the fuel sales at a minimum, and in some cases with stove use monitoring. The UC Berkeley report said that the metered and measured energy for cooking devices is the best of all of the existing methodologies and the least likely to lead to overcrediting. And that in turn should lead to higher carbon credit values. And that is what can enable more impact. So if you take anything away from my presentation today, it's that there are different options available for calculating the carbon impact. That carbon impact can be used to pay for positive outcomes, but we have to use methods that are most accurate so that buyers in the market can have exceptionally high confidence in the outcomes that they're trying to purchase. And that, Christian, is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much on touching a very important topic, which is how can we finance the transition to green cooking. And when it comes to financing, we're talking about carbon credits, and that is why you have been focusing on this. So the next speaker is Matthias Olsen, and Matthias has been working for emerging cooking solutions for years, also in Zambia, mainly, I think. Please share your experience, Matthias, and how you address the issues that Tom has just mentioned.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you very much. And thanks, Tom, for a great presentation there. Can you see my screen? Christian or someone, just checking that you see my screen.
Yes, the screen is there, fine.
Very good. Yeah, so I'm gonna run through this a bit quicker, and being aware of time, and also Tom covered quite a number of my points already here. So we know it's a huge problem with charcoal. It has a climate footprint on par with global aviations. And solution really is to switch fuel. It's really about not doing less bad, but it's actually doing switching to something clean. And biomass and pellets, densified biomass, is the best value for money. There is no question about it. There are studies confirming this, and our ample experience from, I think, all four of us would confirm that it's the best value for money of the modern cooking solutions. It's also important to leverage appropriate technology like pay-as-you-go mobile money, but also really collect data as appropriate, and to use that to really maximize usage, because usage and impact is the same thing. So really, this is a huge climate win when we switch people to clean cooking. Here is the table. I won't go into detail, but you can look at it in different ways. You can look at thermal energy values, and also the thermal efficiency of the stoves and the energy values and the cost. There are different ways to do it. Also, USA did a control cooking test in Zambia, very thorough. comparing all the fuels and the cost, and they come to pretty much the same conclusion that pellets is it's about almost half the price of charcoal and substantially cheaper than LPG. There's also a lot to dive into here, but briefly I want to say that based on 10 years of experience running emerging cooking solutions, I'm co-founder and CEO. There are many aspects that are really important to the customers. Things like turndown ratio is talked very little about. It's basically what range of power you can get in the stove. It's extremely important. Think about the difference in power needs of frying an egg or bringing a big pot of water to boil, or like frying onion, for example. It's a big difference. Also a big difference in time ranges. So the ideal cooking solution has a wide range of time and heat, and it is clean, and it is easy to start, and it is affordable, cheap. And you see here a comparison of the costs that basically cooking with pellets is the best. This is just to illustrate, a slightly improved stove, not much more than that. This is what we call a second generation, a natural draft gasifier. It's better. And a third generation would be a forced air gasifier, which is a huge step up. And I would say it's actually good enough. It's really, really loved by customers. And it provides really good performance and really low emissions. And it's a true health level stove. So this is really what can enable the masses to get clean cooking. We've developed what we call fourth generation. It is taking a huge new step forward. It comes with slightly higher costs because there's more electronics and also sensors, and it's really advanced airflows. But you see on the picture, for example, you would not get that with a third generation stove, and you can particularly use the blue flame face very effectively. It extends the cooking range dramatically, the turndown ratio dramatically, the emissions are extremely low. These are the test results from Aprovecchio with the Supermoto stove, and also looking at the market leading stoves and also typical rocket stove. And if you look at PM, for example, particulate matter, this is very close to the aspirational tier 5. It's just about 20-30% away from that. And here, these are all tier 5, PM low power and CO and low power and high power, which is amazing. CO is not so hard to achieve low emissions with, but PM is the hard one, particularly PM low power. And Aprovecchio even said, I never thought that we would see a biomass stove come so close to meeting the aspirational rate target. Here we're doing a rather large survey with an American university, indoor PM emission testings. It was concluded in June this year. We don't know the results yet, but it will be published. The stove is not yet in high volume production due to lack of funding, which is the biggest problem in the clean cooking sector. But we've spent a lot of mostly out of pocket and also grant money, thousands of hours in advanced lab. And really, this is, I think, really a game changer. But we have to get it finally to the market. A similar version is being produced in Durban now this month in South Africa. But this stove is not quite at full scale production yet, but we hope it will happen soon. The other thing I want to talk about, which follows from Tom's point also on high quality carbon credits, it's really, the keyword here is digital MRV, measurement, reporting and verification system. And it's about capturing the usage data. And the best proxy for that, surprisingly, is not Internet of Things or IoT data. It's actually fuel sales data. So you don't even have to have stoves connected to internet. Although we have developed a connection platform and connected over 3,000 stoves to internet, we have millions of cooking session records. So we know a lot about how they're used. But really, it's the fuel sales record that is the most important, actually. We have a very close partnership with the blockchain Internet of Impact, IXO World, and they have really embraced clean cooking. they have spent more than 10,000 engineering hours on developing a platform, which I will demonstrate briefly. It's based on the gold standard measured and metered methodology, and I would argue it's an exceptionally high quality. I want to just show you this picture, because what near real-time carbon credits would mean for the cooking sector is really a compounding effect. Because if you have to wait 18 months for carbon credits, and if you have to wait 2 years to register your program, it's cash that could have been reinvested into productive assets, stoves. So here you see what effect that actually could have over time. I want to dive into details, but we've ICSO has spent a lot of effort in the verification side of the carbon claims. It's actually a two-step process. It's Prospect Energy, a Berlin-based nonprofit that is doing the transactional verification based on mobile money statements, and then a causal AI company in Paris called Skelnix is doing a kind of a white box AI solution with first it's rules based, and then it goes into various other levels, but that is on top of the other one. So really, it's a very, very thorough verification of the claims. And there are many problems it could solve for the carbon markets. Really, time, cost, opaqueness, lack of detail, and that we're moving from literally pen and paper or PDF files and Excel sheets to really connected real time. And I will show you just a quick demo of that. So this is a live platform based on live data with the first 500 connected stoves that we minted. This is the global portfolio. I have my own portfolio here of assets, 15 stoves that are, we call them digital twins. And I use this to offset my flights, for example. I can click on an asset. I just click on one here, number 17. Yeah, I think it's loading. It will show me the different carbon certificates. So everything is connected. I can look at the various factors that have gone into creating this particular carbon credit. Here you see all the factors, and it's all available on the public blockchain. I can look at various other things, and I can always open up and scroll down. What was the project? And everything is with basically digitally verifiable identities and credentials. And it's a very, very amazing way. I can retire carbon credits real time. Every single carbon credits can be unpacked into its constituents. And I can open the 500 stove collection here. We see that basically 1,500 tons or 1.5 million kilo of emissions have been saved in the last 2 months or so from these stoves. Almost 30,000 meals have been, or 30,000 families have received food from this. The fuel sold for these stoves in this period is here. It's real-time data. It's fetching it. As you can see, blockchain is normally a little bit slower. So it's about 100 tons of pellets for these stoves. Time savings, 7,000 hours estimated, also cost savings. So I think I'll stop there. And I should say also the idea is that this is a platform that other companies can join. It's very much built as a software as a service. The idea is really to take carbon credits to a level of digital MRV that is accessible through software as a service, and that can bring companies carbon revenue near instantly. In theory, it could be instantly. You sell the bag, it's verified by various instances. And if there is a buyer already with a smart contract, it will be near instant. But of course, if it's monthly or weekly, it's so much better than taking 18 months.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Very exciting what you have been developing. Maybe just a few words. I mean, you have not only tried to sell stoves to develop the technology, but you have also provided the fuel. Can you just say a few words about that? Because without the fuel?
Yeah, I think all of us have to be very vertically integrated. It's where the market is at. So we are sourcing biomass, offcuts from forestry plantations, pine wood. We are producing pellets. We have a 2.5 ton an hour Andritz press. We hope to upgrade it to 5 ton in the next periods. Yeah, we have learned a lot about making pellets in Africa. We've been doing it almost for 10 years now. And it comes with particular things. It's not exactly the same conditions as in Europe, but it's very doable. And I think also potentially moving into grasses, I think others here are also pioneering this. I think that could also be a game changer. But the biomass is there, and really it could, my vision is really this turning into a several 10 million, even potentially 100 million ton industry in Africa, certainly several 10 million tons, because every household would need about 0.5 ton of pellets per year to cook, plus minus. So that very quickly becomes very high volumes then. So yeah, and for families to basically buy domestically produced fuel, it has a huge, Forex is a big issue in this part of the world. In countries like Malawi, you have fuel shortages and other things. I mean, petrol and diesel. Forex is extremely important, and importing fuel like LPG, it's a very, very important key factor if you can actually make the fuel in the country itself, and you add a lot of value in the country instead of it happening outside.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's one of the key advantages of green cooking compared to clean cooking, that we are really using the local resources. One question was there in the chat, Matthias asking for the 4th generation cook stove. Can you give us an idea when this will finally come to the market?
Well, unfortunately, probably not until early next year or so, but we will certainly announce it. And it's very much related to funding. We could have had this done a long time ago, because the test that you saw, that was actually done, a 1.5 years ago but to go from prototype to high volume production is a huge step. And this is where we're at. But we will certainly announce that. And yeah, I would love to work with many of you here.
Thank you so much. And with this, we switch to the next veteran of green cooking. And I'm very glad to welcome Ruben Walker. He is CEO and I think co-founder of African Clean Energy. Ruben, share your experiences with us.
Thank you, Christian. I'm assuming my slides are working?
Yes, they're fine.
Fantastic. Pleasure to be able to speak with the WBA here. So as my colleagues have already illustrated, around 3 billion people currently have inadequate access to basic energy. Basic energy generally across the world in developing nations is relatively homogeneous, i.e. most people have approximately the same needs. Generally, people want lighting, which through LED is not very energy intensive at all. People generally have mobile phones or smartphones, also not very energy intensive. Small electronics, radios and such. And that's sort of where the electricity need often ends. And then there is, of course, the need for cooking and potentially space heating in cold countries. And that is really, really energy intensive. And I think that's one thing that we really do need to internalize, is the reason why clean cooking is often a different sector to what is considered to be the energy sector, i.e. the electricity sector, is because it is so energy intensive. And that is why we can't really expect to build the same infrastructure to address this problem when the needs are so diverse. When people don't have good access to energy, people cook on open fire. Yes, that causes 3 to 8 tons of CO2 emissions per household per year. Unfortunately, kills around 4 million people a year and causes a lot of health-related misery. And in Africa, it is often the #1 cause of deforestation. contrary to some other parts of the world where there is also a lot of deforestation, but where it may be related to slash and burn agriculture or cattle, palm oil production. In many countries in Africa, it is just basic energy needs and people taking care of themselves and their families. And for the biomass fuel sector, this is an incredible opportunity because we have over 500 million households that essentially need that half ton of pellets or other biofuel on an annual basis. And that would be enough to drive up the demand for these types of fuels by up to an order of magnitude. African Clean Energy, or ACE's solution, is a integrated hybrid energy system. So this is a system that combines solar with the power of fan gasification biomass. It gives us the opportunity to save an enormous amount of fuel. We're talking about 50 to 85% per household. We can get smokeless combustion of a broad range of fuels. That means we can get started even in regions where there isn't access to sustainable pellets and briquettes yet, and we can create that sort of baseload of consumption and then start introducing the fuels. As mentioned, the system provides both lighting and phone charging to households because that electricity component is relatively easy to serve once you have a battery and solar panel in the household, which clean cooking actually does require. And what makes our system historically unusual is that we can track all the usage data as if it were a virtual grid. So we can see through data uploads which household, which region is consuming energy in different ways. And we can also adjust our approach for certain regions. So if we see that in one part of the country, we're getting a lot less usage than we would expect, then we can find out why that is, and perhaps whether the convenience of a fuel like a pellet or a briquette would make the difference. Just to give a bit of an idea of how this works, so we're very, very data driven, and this starts in the factory. Every unit that is manufactured comes with its own unique serial number and is entered into the system there and then. The stove in the factory is set in the system as having reduced zero grams of CO2, and then flows through the value chain into our warehouse, up to sales teams. Everywhere it goes, we keep logging the data so that we can track exactly where the unit is until it gets to the customer. And then the method of data transfer is through an Android app. So we have the Ace Connect app. If that is on the user's phone, then every time they charge the phone, we get a data upload and we can see exactly how much these systems are being utilized. If the customer doesn't have a phone, we can leverage the devices of either fuel delivery people, maintenance workers, or neighbors who we do incentivize to also connect the systems of people around them. Now, this also applies to fuels. Each bag of fuel that ACE procures from its suppliers and puts into the system gets tracked throughout its value chain, into the warehouse, into the sales team's hands, and then from the sales team into the customer, so that we can actually attach the exact record of fuel purchases per household to the usage record in data of the system. And so we can pair the two together and see exactly, this is how much usage we had, this is how much fuel we had, therefore this is the amount of CO2 that has been reduced. And as my colleagues have also illustrated, CO2 is absolutely key to this sector. That went a bit fast. So where are we at the moment? We have bespoke proprietary tech, and we have 4 countries where we're operational: Uganda, Kenya, Cambodia, and Lesotho. Our data systems are extremely scalable, meaning that it doesn't really matter whether we have 10,000 customers or 10 million customers. The data can be processed, and it's just a case of scaling up sales teams and call centers and service and response workers. There is an enormous demand here, and it's really exciting that we can basically grow into the market and create the demand for the pellets and/or briquettes wherever we go, creating opportunities for people to start manufacturing. And so we operate in countries where there isn't always existing pellet or briquette manufacturing capacity, but having a certain number of our ACE1 units in the community already creates this basic demand, and people can start with relatively small scale briquette production and then graduate towards larger scale pellet production if we cannot already establish relationships with bigger pellet suppliers. But there is such an enormous opportunity in these regions to create fuel because nobody is doing it. I mean, essentially our only serious competitor as the biomass fuel sector is fossil fuel. Just a bit of a headline on where we stand. We've got 80,000 units in the market. That means we've improved the health of over 400,000 customers and their family members. And we're a B Corp with 179.8 points, which is the #2 rating in the world. Final thought I want to settle on is the virtuous cycle. What we can see is when customers are using our system and they are procuring fuel, they are having a lot of impact. We can quantify the carbon impact that's being had. When we then sell that carbon on behalf of the customer, it gives us an additional revenue stream that first of all closes the business case, but also allows us to share revenue with our customers. And the primary way to share that value is in giving better access to fuel. Because generally speaking, when you bring sustainable fuel that has been responsibly produced in factories where workers are being treated well, it tends to be slightly more expensive in market terms than the existing fuel supply that's been around for centuries. But the carbon can more than make up for that. So we can make sure that we just sell the lowest cost fuel in the market. And customers are free to choose to use that, or if there is, for whatever reason, not an available supply of pellets and briquettes, they can use whatever is around, what people were using before, be it firewood, agricultural waste, even animal dung, but use it efficiently and smokelessly until there is a supply of biomass fuel. It's a little bit of an overview of what that looks like to us. We can see exactly where the usage is coming from. We can see that geographically. We can see totals. We can see monthly patterns. We can see daily patterns, and we can adjust essentially on a daily basis to see, are we seeing customers that are using the system 15 hours a day? Why would that be? We can phone up the customer and find out, are they a commercial user who is using this system? If they are a commercial user, what is the fuel that they're using? Can we offer them pellets or briquettes that can have a massive, massive impact? On average, a commercial user can have, 4 or 5 times the impact of a regular household. So that data is really what makes this opportunity so exciting. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ruben. That was also quite impressive, and you have been going a very far way already with your systems, with 80,000 units in the market operating, monitored. That's really a beautiful record, and I think a very encouraging example. I mean, you mentioned the use of other fuels. I also did some testing, and I found out that, I mean, a number of things work very well in these gasification stoves, such as crushed nutshells, wood chips from wood residues or from invasive bushes, all kinds of things that are kind of in a reasonably way structured. But now let me turn to our next speaker, and our next speaker is Mr. Dave Lello. He is the founder and manager of Ekasi Energy, a South African company. Dave, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Christian, and good morning to everyone. I'm not going to talk much about carbon credits this morning. I think this has been well covered. I'm going to spend 3 or 4 slides just describing our stove and why we've developed it. And then I will go into some of the, I believe, commercial issues around the cook stove market. So the stove that you see on the screen is called the FAB stove, which stands very simply for a forced air biomass stove. It uses gasification like many of the stoves that you've seen this morning. It is slightly different in that it has a removable gasifier, and I'll go through some of that. The unit is designed and built in Africa, and we have a partnership which I will explain. And although we say you can use any biomass in it, pellets are a great fuel because of the following reasons. One, they have a very low moisture content and a high calorific value. Number 2, they're very consistent. So namely, sometimes when you use wood chips or something like that, something's wet, something's dry, and they're not very consistent in their format. And number 3, once pellets are made, they're able to be bought in a packet and transported and moved around fairly easily, much easier than ethanol or gas or anything like that. So I'm going to go down to the next slide. The system is designed around gasification. We have what we call a gasification engine. Gasification is based on a 2-stage combustion where we pyrolyze or heat the wood, the biomass, and it releases gases, and those gases are then burnt at the top of the gasifier. This technology was developed for cooking around about 25 years ago, probably more, 30 years ago, and it's recognized as a fairly efficient and clean combustion method. I think Tom and Matthias, a number of them pointed this out. We get 4 times the combustion efficiency of an open fire, and as Tom pointed out, we can get probably around about 10% or less of the emissions that a normal fire would provide us. It's a very small, compact device and highly efficient and is great technology. Our stove design is based on a modular approach. So we have frames, we have gasifiers, and we have fan units. And this is really designed in such a way that in the field, the units are serviceable. So our commitment going forward is that any part of the stove will be sold as a spare and available in the market. And it's people in the market, both resellers and end users, are able to replace or upgrade any part of the stove at any point in time, which allows ease of maintenance over a long period of time and lowers the cost of ownership. These parts are built in Africa, in South Africa, in a factory, and they are shipped as components and assembled in the markets where we will address them. Our stove is going to be built by a company called Energy Africa. They already ship over 1 million rocket stoves a year, and are now putting up a new line to do the fab stove or the pellet stove. At the same time, they are building the same line is being used to build what we call a super pot. The super pot has got an interesting technology in that it uses a double wall on the pot and takes the hot air that normally exits out the side of the pot and actually takes up the wall through some holes at the top and can improve the thermal efficiency by over 20%. So where a gasifier would probably operate somewhere between 40 and 50%, we can get over 55% thermal efficiency by conserving the hot air that normally just escapes and taking it up the side of the pot. The super pots are going to be built in 2, 4, 6, and 8 liter versions, and they will be available in the market simultaneously with the Fab stove. The Fab stove has taken, as Matthias has discussed, some years. It's been developed for a number of years, but the factory is now fully operational, and we expect our first commercial versions to be off the line in the next couple of weeks. We are just completing the testing of all of the equipment, and shipping should start in the next couple of weeks. Our first project is in Malawi, where we hope to ship 2,000 to 3,000 stoves, followed by Zambia, followed by a project in South Africa. So we have projects waiting for these stoves. I'm going to, this has already been discussed this morning, but I think it's important just to reiterate that the technology, it is able to use pellets that are used from a number of sources. These can be used from various different woods or agrochemicals or agro waste or energy crops. This lowers the consumption per capita. Typically, somebody would be using a quarter of the fuel that they normally use in an open fire. And thirdly, there are low emissions, so the health, as Thomas pointed out, is then improved. The last thing about the stoves is that they actually produce a carbon biochar as its byproduct. So they're actually, in certain cases, could be considered a carbon negative device. They support a number of SDGs, and as you can see from the side, it is really a great tool. So how do we approach the gasifier market? I think in this approach market, I think that my first advice to you is that you need to think of yourself as Shell Oil and not as a Ford Motor Company. Can you hear? Is it okay?
Dave, maybe you turn off your camera to improve the transmission.
I will do that. Is that better?
Yes, just proceed. We cannot hear you anymore, Dave. Have you probably muted your microphone also? Now we can hear you, yes.
Okay. So as I said, I think as a, can you hear me now?
Off and on.
Can you hear Christian?
Yes. So seems like Dave Lello dropped off. He's back again now. Let's see if he can sort the technical issues with connectivity. Matthias, there was a question from the audience regarding the fact that people are used to cooking on fire and they believe that the smoke also adds to the flavor of the food. Do you see such issues as you promote green cooking, as you promote pellets as a fuel emerging, or is that less important than the advantages? Can you comment that, Matthias?
Yeah, Christian, I don't see any such issues switching from charcoal. There might be issues in rural areas where they cook with firewood typically, because there the firewood will really add a certain flavor to the food. It really tastes, I mean, everything tastes still a bit smoky, I feel, but in replacing charcoal, it's really not an issue. The main thing is really like, you know, accessibility to pellets and so on, you know, like that they're easy. We actually do home delivery with electrical three-wheelers, for example. So things like that is much more important than, you know, kind of the cultural aspect, which is often put out in literature as being an obstacle, but it's not our experience at all.
Thank you for commenting. Dave, you're back. Let's see if the connection works now. I'm afraid I cannot hear you, Dave. I think we have to close it at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, just one more promotional remark from my side.
So,
Dave, you're back. Okay, let's
I'm
try.
sorry about the network. You need to see yourself as a shell oil. Can you hear me?
We can see it all right, Dave. Can you proceed with your presentation, Dave? Doesn't seem to be the case. Ladies and gentlemen, one last thing I wanted to recommend to you. World Bioenergy Association has only a week or two ago published a new website. That website is called propellets.africa. And the idea of this website is to provide all the information about green cooking projects, about pellet production projects in Africa, and provide also information for people that want to engage in projects. What do you need before you can kick off a project, a green cooking project? And it is, I think, going to be a really nice and rich resource of information. So propellets.africa, have a look, and I'm glad to meet you again in one of our next webinars. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining and have a nice day. Goodbye.